We have some more news from the NHL waiver wire. We have more news on the Vancouver Canucks, and it's not good. They're going to be out for a little while. Plus, we have the latest trade rumors on a potential deal brewing between the Flames and the Leafs, and we're also going to look at some trade talk involving the Penguins and the Panthers. We'll discuss the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. We have a variety of things to discuss. Before we jump into the trade rumors, a few other quick notes here. Let's start with the Vancouver Canucks and the unfortunate news we heard today. We know the last couple of days here they've run into some issues with some players going into COVID protocols and some of their practices and games having to be canceled or postponed, and it's not getting any better. The list has grown. They now have, I believe it's 8 players on the COVID protocol list, and one of the previous cases that was reported a couple days ago was a member of the coaching staff. So it's obviously running, fairly rampant here through the team. So originally they were hoping to shut them down until April 6th, resuming play April 8th. I would think that it's a fairly high chance now that is going to change, and that the Canucks are likely going to end up being shut down for 2 weeks. I mean, given what we know about the virus and how it typically goes, most people have to isolate for 14 days when they're testing positive, so it's likely going to take that long to kind of get the Canucks back healthy here. Hopefully nobody that's positive is running into any kind of serious symptoms or anything. We'll have to wait to be seen on that, but hopefully all goes well in that regard, and we'll be a little while waiting for the Canucks to get back in action. So that's certainly not going to give them a lot of opportunity to really battle themselves back into a playoff spot, which I know is probably out of reach at this point, but it's certainly not going to make things any better. So we'll see. Wait further news on that. Now, of course, on the waiver wire news, we had 3 players go through waivers yesterday, and they all cleared. Reminder on who they are: we had Matt Luff of the Los Angeles Kings, Nikita Gusev of the New Jersey Devils, and Tyler Ennis of the Edmonton Oilers. So all 3 cleared. No claims were put in. They remain with their existing clubs. And we have an interesting name today. Detroit Red Wings young player Evgeny Svechnikov, of course, brother of Andrei Svechnikov in Carolina, is being put through waivers, which I found a little weird. To be honest, I'm not really sure I completely understand his path and his development and how the Wings have handled everything there. I know he's battled his fair share of injuries, but he's an interesting prospect that I think could still turn out to be a regular, consistent, producing player in the right spot with the right tools and right coaching, etc. But we'll see if anybody claims him. Those are the kinds of players that seems to be getting picked up, or ones on cheaper contracts, short term, that kind of stuff, that are not, any kind of high risk or long term associated. I mean, we've seen a few others like Ennis, for example, go through waivers yesterday and claimed, but somebody might want to take a flyer on Svechnikov as a young prospect that could be a bit of a project with some potential upside here. So we'll see how things go. We'll find out at noon Eastern tomorrow if he's still a member of the Red Wings or if he is indeed moving on. Now, as I mentioned, we have some latest NHL trade talk here. We're getting closer and closer now. We're 10 days away to the NHL trade deadline. There's new information coming out every day. So you got to keep something in mind here. There's a lot of teams, especially the ones that are known to definitely want to be buyers here. They're probably having several conversations with several teams, hence different teams being linked to different players, different teams pretty much here on a daily basis, depending on what NHL source or insiders we're getting information from. So there's going to be all kinds of talk. Some of this will take place, some of it won't, but here's the latest of what we're hearing is being discussed as some potential trades. Now, first up, the Florida Panthers. I mean, we have goaltender Chris Driedger, who is a hot commodity right now. He is a guy who's on a cheap contract with the Florida Panthers, having a bit of a renaissance season. Of course, he's a guy who's like a lot of goaltenders. This is not that uncommon to be a little bit of a late bloomer into his mid to late 20s. It's not that uncommon at all, but he's a guy who's been in Florida and has had an opportunity to play a lot more due to the not-so-great play last year and this year of Sergei Bobrovsky, and he's really flourished and seized the opportunity. Now, of course, we have an expansion draft coming up. When you have Bobrovsky on a really expensive contract at $10 million a year, even doesn't matter what the situation is with Bobrovsky, he's not going to be traded, and he's not going to be claimed in an expansion draft. He will be in Florida as long as he plays, because nobody's taking that contract on, so they can't really protect any other goalies. So if Driedger were to sign and stay, he's going to likely get plucked by Seattle. I mean, that's just too good of an opportunity for them to pass up. And then you have the news that we really weren't too surprised by. They have their former first-round pick from a couple of years ago, Spencer Knight, leaves Boston College, turns pro, signs his entry-level contract, and a lot of teams and a lot of executives around the NHL are saying, okay, what does this mean? Because they're letting that contract kick in this year. And he also has a clause in there which is very, very uncommon that I didn't learn about immediately upon hearing of the signing. That information only came out a little bit later. But Spencer Knight has a clause in his contract that he has a bonus opportunity on top of the normal Schedule AB bonuses that you normally see, that if he were to win the Conn Smythe Trophy, his playoff MVP, anytime during an entry-level deal, he gets $1 million bonus. So for guys making the kind of money they make as rookies, that's pretty substantial. That's a pretty big bonus. So if they're putting a clause like that in there, you would have to think there's some kind of an agreement that he's going to have a lot of opportunity to be able to play. Now, going into next year, I would think that it's pretty much, pretty likely a 90% chance at least that he becomes the backup or maybe the starter, depending on how Bobrovsky plays. We've seen that Florida's not afraid to sit Bobrovsky when he's not playing well, but like the tandem would be Bob and Knight going into next year, whereas Driedger likely has to move on for a variety of reasons here because of expansion draft complications, salary cap complications, and the fact that they already have two other guys that they kind of have to go with here, as much as they appreciate and I'm sure love how he's been playing for them. So Chris Driedger is getting a ton of interest, and general manager Bill Zito in Florida is getting a ton of phone calls. It was reported on Insider Trading that not only is he getting a lot of calls asking, what does this mean? What are your plans with Driedger? But apparently he was even made a few offers to consider right away. Now, of course, they're not in a position where they have to rush here. They have a couple weeks to get this figured out. Spencer Knight still has to go through, some protocols before he can even join the team officially. But given the fact that Florida hasn't really had much of any playoff success recently, and the fact that they're having a good regular season and are better situated here to go into the playoffs, you would think they'd want Driedger there, but I guess, like I said, they have all these other factors that they may not have a choice but to trade him. And given the fact he doesn't make a ton of money, a lot of teams will have an easy time fitting him in under the cap. So he could be one of the hottest commodities if indeed he is traded, with a lot of teams looking for either insurance or potential upgrade. There's a lot of playoff teams that will take a look at that. I don't know what the asking price is going to be, but Bill Zito is going to have a ton of options on his table here to consider for trading Chris Driedger. So that's going to be a very interesting situation to watch down the stretch here as we get closer to the deadline. Now, another team I want to take a look at is the Pittsburgh Penguins. We have recent comments from both GM Ron Hextall and President of Hockey Operations Brian Burke. Hextall recently spoke with NHL.com, and they've kind of given a little bit of a hint as to what their plans are going to be. I wonder, though, if they might reconsider the goalie stuff. I mean, I know when they first came to Pittsburgh after Rutherford resigned, it was reported that they were really considering making a trade to upgrade goaltending. They weren't happy with how Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith were playing. They tried to get Marc-Andre Fleury back from Vegas, but of course, no dice there. Vegas was not even entertaining that idea, which you don't blame them. How Fleury's been playing, they're not going to go down that road, at least not right now. So for Jerry, though, he's been playing much better, and they've decided, we're probably in better shape than we thought here, but now Jerry got hurt. So, of course, I would think that it's going to depend on how long he's out, whether or not they want some insurance there. It's hard to say. They could be a team looking on a guy like Chris Driedger. I mean, it's not a ton of money, but it depends on the price. But at the end of the day here, based on their comments, Brian Burke and Ron Hextall both alluded to the fact that they want some size, some toughness, and ideally a center, but, it could be even a player who's possibly a winger, but a winger maybe who's used to taking more of the faceoffs and can do a good job on them when he does. But some depth at that position with, like a big, strong, tough guy who can play, of course, not looking at a guy who's just going to be a goon out there, but that's kind of the type of player that they're looking to add. So if they want some help on face-offs and they want somebody that's decent size, they could be looking to like a Glendening, for example, in Detroit. There's always a guy like Brett Ritchie in Calgary who's getting some attention. Vancouver would have some players that they might be willing to move on from. You get Nick Delorier in Anaheim. Depends on what they want and how much skill and all that they want with it, but they certainly want to add some size in strength in the bottom six part of their forward group. Like I said, and ideally, if it can be somebody who plays center and is good on faceoffs, would be that much more likely. That's kind of what they're targeting right now. It's believed Marcus Pettersson would be the main player they would trade, or try to at least, to free up enough salary cap space to facilitate that kind of a move and to give them a little bit more flexibility cap-wise. Any team looking for help on the blue line would be some of their best trading partners, because that's what they would prefer to do. They don't have a first round pick right now. They don't really have a ton of futures they can move on from. It has to be something off the roster if the Penguins are going to get any deals done. Now, as I mentioned as well, could we see a deal brewing between the Leafs and the Flames? I mean, that's the latest talk that we're seeing as far as the Maple Leafs are concerned. We know they're kind of exploring the goalie market, but they're preferably looking for help in the forward group and maybe some depth on defense. It'll kind of be a little bit of everything if they can squeeze it in. The goaltender stuff right now, I don't think is anywhere near a guarantee that they're going to do. I think they're just making calls, doing some due diligence, as we've heard from guys like Elliot Friedman. Pierre LeBrun is convinced that they're not really too sure, but they're not really all that interested right now in goaltending. They're not worried, but others seem to think that they are, and it makes sense if they're getting information that says that they're just doing due diligence, calling around, checking things out, because right now we don't know the long-term prognosis for Freddie Anderson. Jack Campbell's been in and out, and Michael Hutchinson has been okay at times, but I don't really want to go in to the playoffs with Hutchinson being any more than a number 3. So they could use some insurance, and they have to have their homework done so that if they get to the point closer to the deadline that, we really do need a goalie, they have something lined up. And there's been some rumors that they're doing some exploratory stuff around Flames goalie David Riddick and, of course, forward Brett Ritchie. Both those guys would be somewhat of an easy acquisition because neither one of them make a ton of money. They're both pending unrestricted free agents as well. So they're not players they're tied to long-term. They'd both be rentals if they needed them to be. They could consider signing them, but they don't have to. And, of course, the price likely would be Kerfoot being the main player off the roster to make the room financially. And then they have other either picks or prospects that could be included to make the rest of the deal even out. So, it's hard to say what prospects it would be because it depends on who they end up acquiring. But really, Brett Ritchie is turned out to be a pretty decent player for Calgary. He's had opportunity to play top 6 minutes at times, not consistently, but he obviously adds a lot of size at 6'4". Pretty strong guy. He's not afraid to drop the gloves, so he can add that element in there as well. And he can play with some of the more offensive players and kind of fit in and help create some space for them. So I think he could be a versatile player that can kind of play anywhere from your first, second, third, fourth. Like, he could play anywhere. So he's a versatile guy. And Riddick could be that insurance play piece that's not going to cost him too much. I mean, yeah, he's not been lights out this year, but you know what? He's had his moments in the past where he's been fantastic. And obviously he earned the nickname Big Save Dave for a reason. Like, he's had times where he's been an excellent NHL goaltender. So, I mean, they're not necessarily looking to go out and grab a big number 1 goalie. That's going to cost too much money. So if they do get a goalie, a guy like Riddick, who's looking for that opportunity to kind of reignite his career, who's a pending UFA on a fairly inexpensive contract, would be the type of player they would likely target. And it could be a great deal for him. So we'll see. I mean, the Leafs and Flames very well could make good trade partners in this scenario. Right now, I think, in my opinion at least, the top 4 spots in the North are pretty much spoken for. I don't see teams like Calgary and Vancouver climbing their way back in. And at the end of the day, they're likely going to be sellers. I mean, we've seen Brad Treliving change the coach, and now it's going to be time that they're going to probably sell off what they can at the deadline when it comes to their unrestricted free agents. But it's more likely, I mean, not to say that we couldn't see something more substantial from Calgary ahead of time, but I would think that the bigger deals for shaking things up, if they go to that road, which you think is pretty much a guarantee, that's going to happen probably in the offseason. But we'll see. So let me know your thoughts on a potential Leafs-Flames deal. Do you think that makes sense for Toronto? It kind of gives them what they're looking for without costing too much. It helps them squeeze it in under the cap with only losing 1 roster player. And I think overall they'd probably be a little bit better, a little bit deeper team with those guys in the mix. So let me know what you think down below and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.